Okay, we are recording.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome back to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? We get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method to look at statistics. And all that means, folks, is that we're using statistics to guide us to the answer instead of cherry picking statistics to back up something that we might have a gut feeling about. Joining me as he does each and every week, he is the fantasy professor, a real professor, John Bush. Now, John, you haven't changed your name since you went to Hawaii, have you? You
No,
didn't adopt a Hawaiian name.
no, I have not. Enjoyed my time, my visit. I've never been to Hawaii before, and it was I had a great time, and lots of interesting fish and birds and scenery, and it was a great time. And I've been hitting the data, the secret data, so much. You and I just spent what 9:30, 10:30, 2 hours going over secret clubhouse stuff, and now we're doing this show here. So I'm looking forward, Dennis, to what you've been hatching, some of your questions and whatever do you want to talk about here. I guess the draft's coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and I think once the draft gets here, we're going to see a little more sanity returning to the fantasy football work. And we'll also see some insanity added to it because we always do. You always get this guy who was drafted in the fifth round that everybody's convinced is going to be the star. We understand that what draft capital means, and we understand what having an opportunity means when it comes to these rookie players, and we don't get fooled. But one of the reasons we don't get fooled and assume we know it all, Professor, is because we understand the range of outcomes. If doing our data research has taught us anything, it's to understand that yes, there are patterns to the data that help guide you to an answer. But within any even subgroup, the best 5% of players, or however you want to characterize that, there is a range of possible outcomes for that player. It's not just one number. This guy's my QB5, and that's it, folks. There's no other chance of him doing anything except for quarterback 5. My question, my first philosophical question of 2 today.
Oh boy.
Why do so many fantasy football content producers seem to lack that range of outcomes concept when they're communicating to the general public? Are they that sure as they're saying, oh, he's my top guy and nothing else could happen? Or is that just a game that they play to appear more confident? Because if you ask me who my top guy is at running back, for instance, I'll say Bijan Robinson, but. And that but shows the range of outcomes of where I think he can finish. But I'm fairly confident that the worst we're going to see from Bijan Robinson is if he doesn't get hurt, and that's always the thing. And there's two ways to get hurt, right? You can get hurt where you're out for the rest of the year, or you can get hurt where you're just hurt enough that your performance declines, but you're still out there on the field every week. And that can sometimes be more dangerous than just being out totally because you don't know when to bench a guy. But why are so many people not showing a range of outcomes concept because, like I said, for Bijan Robinson, he's my RB1, but I'm putting a range on him, barring injury, stays healthy, plays 10 games or more for me. He's like my RB1 to RB5 is my range of outcomes for him. That's different than a Jamar Gibbs who might share that top spot. His range of outcomes might be a 1, but I might have a 10 on his floor. Why do we not talk in range of outcomes? Why is there so much certainty in an uncertain science like fantasy football?
Uh, from my point of view, it's first thing, add complexity because I'm looking for value ADP. So I don't see enough of that. It's irrelevant if
Yes.
he's your number
Yes.
one, if he's going number one versus if he's going the 10th RB. So I and you, because I know together when we're drafting and making cheat sheets that gets our attention. The third or fourth best RB could be the number one value. So there's this value concept. I think, as far as psychologically, if you sound confident, then people think you know what you're talking about in a subtle way. Uh, that's some of it. Uh, There's a lot of smart people that have never gotten a PhD, Dennis. You're one. You could have gotten a PhD given your obsessiveness. I mean, look at your picture here. It looks like you're ready to just get into that data. That's part of it. Just life took you in a different direction, and there's a lot of that. So I'm just telling you, Pete, having a PhD, piled higher, deeper, there are PhDs in non-science that it's like, economics is an example.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
it's like, really? Are you, versus a physicist? I mean, there's some, and then biologists would tend to be towards the physicist and away from the economics people. So there's a range, but if part of spending 30 or 40 years to be an expert in biology, and it's not just biology, for me, it's eukaryotic microbiology. I studied a slime mold and I studied aspects of a slime mold. So if you think about it, I studied like a Tesla car, but only the brake system. I took 30 years to figure all that out and make it better. And that's the depth here, Dennis. If we're digging a hole, I've as deep as we could go. And when you get your PhD, you're supposed to be at the top of the mountain. You're supposed to be the best of the best, and you spend the rest of your career trying to stay uh, up there. But age, time, and these young folks, and you're drawn down the mountain, and you're not the top dog anymore. And there's a lot of that with, say, running backs. You can, as they get older and you see them going down a little bit, age does catch up with them. So there is some of that, but I think there's a missing component value. I think there's a tricky component where if I sound like I know what I'm talking about, then maybe you'll click my site and I can collect an extra lollipop or 10 cents or whatever you get per click, or, a Tootsie Roll or whatever you win, So, Dennis, I'm so far away from the average Joe on the street. But I will say this, Dennis, I've said this before. You and I are not selected for in this environment because,
No.
yeah, we're not going to, like, oh, I'll walk through a bed of coals to say Bijan is the number one. I think he's number one to maybe four or five, but that's a range. If he ends up number six, is that bad? or good. You know, boy, Bush doesn't know anything. He said number one, and he was the sixth best, beating 11 other players in a league that you know, how good do you have to be? You know, if you put 1,000 in against 11 other people, I'm assuming that changes the level of competition. So, Dennis, I changed my name and I'm in the cheap league. So you don't know what you got there. So, you know, I mean, we got people that go auto draft, you know, that hangover's too, I'm trying to forget. So I'll pick a couple and I'll hit auto draft and go sleep all my hangover. And that's fine with me because I enjoy that advantage. So there's a lot of complexity, and complexity doesn't sell at the horse track, right? The tip sheet, here it is, number one. And look what I did last week. And here I am. I'm the best ever. And, you know, a lot of attention, you know, sideshow carnivals make a lot of money doing that, you know. They'll, come here, boy, let me tell you. And, you know, so what you gonna tell me? You know, give me some money and I'll tell you everything. And it's the fortune tellers, it's the same thing. And I wrote an article called The Expert Problem. It's on our site, scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can read on my opinions about it. We don't have fantasy football informatic experts, people that have got a PhD in, in the stats and data analysis and have done this. Nobody's that I've seen has done that, right? So we don't really have the traditional experts. And so anybody can flap their chops and say they're an expert.
And that's very interesting. And I'll take it a step further. You joke about me, you know, not getting my PhD in meteorology. There really are two subgroups of people. There's the people that are interested more in the science of meteorology. And that's very important because those are the people that help develop the models that try to predict what the atmosphere is going to do, because it is a numerical model prediction problem trying to figure out what the weather's going to do in 3 days versus what is the weather going to do over the next 18 hours. Over the next 18 hours, a weather forecaster like myself, now we all start out meteorologists, then some of us choose to spend more of our time learning how to forecast the weather, which is an art form, a prediction. It's no different than fantasy football. You and I can look at the data and understand the range of outcomes for a player, but we also can apply the strategy of the game. It's not only important to understand who's going to be number 1 through number 40 at a position. It's important to understand where to take those guys for the best value and how to build a team that is more likely to give you a chance to weather the bad luck and take advantage of the good luck. That's a strategy thing altogether. And so our expertise in fantasy football kind of bridges across the research gap to the strategy gap. But I don't understand, like last year, Jamar Chase was the definitive, he's the number 1 guy that should be going first in the drafts. He was the consensus number 1. And you and I both pointed out that the data indicated that you had 2 concerns for Chase versus only 1 concern for some other players that we might have considered with that first pick. The teams where you and I drafted and ignored Chase as the number 1 guy, we did better.
Yes.
Because we took a running back.
Yes.
And we took either Bijan or Jamar Gibbs, and we got paid off for that move.
Yes.
So that's the difference here is if you don't understand or you can't explain the range of outcomes, then you're accepting blind allegiance on one player as the number one guy. And there's never just a lock of who's going to be number one. I can make a case for about 6 different running backs. Again, this is assuming a season that it's never going to happen, no injuries to
Right.
the key guys. They're all going to play 10 games or more. That's not going to happen. We're going to lose 3, maybe 4 of the top 12 guys in ADP are going to lose significant time or lose significant value to injuries. It just happens.
Yeah.
We know that's going to happen. It's going to be somewhere between 0 and 4 players they're going to have that happen to every year. So you can't predict injuries. I don't care this injury prone stuff. I don't know how you come up with a term injury prone. Injury possible, like more possible. Bijan Robinson has taken a beating and he keeps coming back every year, whether it was college, whether it's pro. He's come back and he's played versus a guy like A-Shane who has missed more time. So though, is Bijan less subjected to an injury for this year? We can't say that. But over the course of the next several years, I put my money on Bijan staying healthy because he has in the past. But for one season, I'm not sure you can guess that injury prone thing. But I just kind of wish that people would actually be more honest when they're giving fantasy football advice. I think it would be a better world.
I don't think that people want that. They want the security, and then they want to
Yes.
complain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so
And,
that,
there's a methodology there as well,
well,
because when I was a young man, trying to do the tout sheet for my dad's friend at the racetrack for
yeah,
harness races when his son wanted to take 2 weeks off
right.
every summer. And I got a training on what to do
Yeah, can
as far
imagine.
you needed, and this was harness racing. So
Yeah,
at a harness race, the favorite wins at a higher rate than at the flats. And it's about a 4 to 5% difference depending on the size of the track. And I was forecasting for a 5/8 mile track most of the summer, Sportsman's Park. When it switched to 7/8, the game changed. The
mhm.
percentage of favorites went down as it should. But on a smaller track, the favorites do better. A half mile track, they outperform the percentage at a mile track, for instance. So at a 5/8 track, I was told always include that favorite in your top 3. You can put them third if you want, but when the way we grade, so the public can see, is we draw a big circle around your winner for that race. We don't care if he was first, second, or third. And the public is more likely to buy the tout sheet that is showing the most circled players. So if your favorite has a 36% chance of winning on a 5/8 mile track, you better circle him because that's a pretty high percentage chance of winning, especially if he's an inside post. That was the other thing. If he's at 8 or 9 outside post, yeah, you can leave him off if that's the horse you're expecting to be the favorite.
Right.
But inside, from 1 to 7, you better have him on your tout sheet. And if not, I'm going to put him on there for you.
Right.
Was the way it was done. So, it's gutsy in fantasy football. It would be gutsy for somebody to say Bijan Robinson is going to be a bust this year. if anybody had the guts to say that, I would instantly say you don't understand the range of logical outcomes concept.
Well, when people do that, in other words, it, I think there's a psychological aspect. Like, man, this guy can't even pick the top dog here. Why should I listen to him? It's a short-sighted kind of thing. I think with your tip sheet, you probably also worked hard. If the top jockey and trainer were together,
Oh yeah.
you probably
Yes.
couldn't leave them off your top three. That's just,
No.
you know, and there's some other, I'm sure, some other rules. So notice you're not even handicapping reality. You're handicapping the players, the people that are buying. And
Yes.
so I think the marketing research, to get those clicks, I think that's what's driving it, not, you know, somebody, their picks really, like compared to ADP. Uh, it's the value and the whatnot. And it takes so long at the end of the season. People forgot what you said in August, and they like that. People don't remember. I mean, that's why they got upset at fantasy receipts. They get mad when, they remind them, well, back in March, you said this guy was the sure shot. Well, that was back in March. Don't pay attention to me now. That kind of thing. And it becomes comical. And again, I'm trying to beat 11 other players and make money. And that's so I'm not trying to figure out a way that people click on our site. Dennis, nobody's clicking on our site because it's not as clear cut. And I don't want to sell it as being clear cut. There's variation, even things we don't know. And, there's a minefield somewhere out there and you're in the middle and you don't know where it's at or where to step. So you've got to be very cautious, and people don't like that. They want to know the answer. They want the fire without worrying about the wood. As a professor, Dennis, I've told this story. Dr. Bush, just tell us what's on the test. I'll learn about the other stuff in medical school. Yep, you're definitely the doctor I want to work on my kids. Is you just learn just enough to get into medical school. So what do? Do just enough to get your medical license, 70% or higher. So I want that 70% doctor versus the 99% doctor to operate on my brain. This looks like you're ready to operate here. Look at that picture. And, I mean, I don't know. It's just crazy. And, but Dr. Bush says, tell us what's on the test. Make it easy for us. And people want that. Nobody, they treat fantasy football as a hobby, and that's fine. But don't fool yourself to think, oh, I'm going to make money at this if you're not handling like the stock market, right? If you're handling the evidence like you really don't care. And I tell my students when I talked about that, and I said, oh, well, here's a picture of here's my car here. Who wants to buy it? I need 5,000 for this car. People say, well, does it run? Oh, you want a test drive? Okay, well, why don't you drive it up to the street and back? And you're thinking, well, yeah, but then can it go 20 miles without breaking down? Oh, you want that. But Dennis, I show you, here's Bigfoot. Yeah, I see it. I'm convinced. Notice the level of skepticism, the level of the amount of evidence you'll accept to believe something. It's funny when there's money on the line
Oh yeah.
versus, oh, that's fun. So I think a lot of it is people don't think there's money on the line. This is fun. So what if I lose? Yeah, but then 2 weeks into it, you're mad. You know, man, that tout, they suck. I'm gonna use somebody else, Nick. It's still, I'm gonna pull a new tip sheet tomorrow. And they love that because 10 tip sheets and they want you to be jumping back and forth because they'll get some of your money over the month if you jump around, Dennis. So anyway,
And most of the tip sheets that were out at the Chicago tracks, there
yeah.
might be 15 sheets. There were actually only three guys putting them out.
Yeah, well, you know, the gold sheet, the Mo Money sheet, the millionaire sheet, the strike it rich sheet. I mean, you put a lot of lucky horseshoes, dollar signs, and you paint it yellow or gold. You know, that's a guarantee. That's how we would make our fantasy football tip sheet, Dennis. We'd have money and lucky horseshoes and letting the horse wink at us and all this other stuff, and people buy our tip sheets, but we don't do it that we're the fuddy-duddy. You know, we're yeah, that sucks. Don't go there. That sucks. You're just a downer. Debbie Downer. We don't want you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of downness to fantasy football, and you need to be aware of that.
Yeah, my only advice is to avoid the people that you see making five or six outlandish statements a day,
Yeah,
because they will over the course of the entire preseason from now through August, end of August,
yeah,
they will predict 150 busts and 150 hits. And if you're paying attention close enough, some of those lists will overlap. They'll tell you a guy's going to be a bust in June, and then end of July they're telling you he's the greatest value since sliced bread. They play both sides of the street, and then they only share their correct answers. The others get shared by fantasy receipts. So we are the researchers, folks. We are digging into this data deeper than many and maybe even most. But here's the question, philosophical question number two today for you, Professor.
uh-oh.
How many years going back is the right number of years? We want more data, but we know the game is always changing. And it doesn't change just automatically from, we won't see a big philosophical change from 25 to 26.
Yeah,
But if you look at 15 to what we did last year, or 05 to what we did, you look back 10 or 20 years, you can't even recognize the game of football. If you play the opening for CBS football from the 1970s, the mid 1970s, every single one of the plays that they showed, out of 10 plays that they showed, probably 9 of them are illegal now. Like some of those defensive hits, the guy'd be
the
suspended for 5
clothesline,
games.
the
Yeah,
clo-
you'd get suspended for
the
5 games
the
now, and
the horse collar tackle,
that was
the
normal.
tripping.
Yeah. So so the game is changing over time. And I'm not sure how many years is the sweet spot for data research.
Uh, Philosophically, when I approach that, I just start at a 10-year level, but I always know that it's imperfect because the data points are only what, 17 games?
Oh yeah.
And in baseball, I think you have an advantage. You get a lot more games and data points. So it
Yes.
wouldn't, if somebody said the baseball analysts, fantasy analysts have a lot more to work with, that's probably true. But that
Yes.
might mean that there's a lot of people are pointing to the same thing. So it might be harder to distinguish yourself. And I think and I've got a poster that I think I'm going to discuss. Maybe if I think about this bias, it's called complexity bias, where people start making it harder than it should be. I know people thought about Occam's razor, the simplest is the best, and probably what you should say, it's the best to start maybe doing your research. And so you decide, do you go top down or bottom up? And the answer is you do both. And hear it again. What do you mean I got to chop lots of wood? Then I can finally, cook a hot dog over the fire, right? Make s'mores. Yeah, it's not as, I can't set the yard on fire and make s'mores. No, you got to understand building fire, chopping the wood, have fire pit, how much lighter fluid, what's the wind. I mean, that's no fun, Dennis. It's more fun to throw gasoline at a big pile of wood and throw a match and
Oh
make a
yeah.
TikTok about it and laugh,
Oh yeah.
especially when somebody caught on fire and you can yuck at that and get lots of clicks. Look at this fool. And, dancing around, a friend of mine was crazy and he would do the firecracker dance. We'd throw about 1,000 firecrackers lighted on the street and he'd get in the middle and dance around, let the firecrackers pop on him. And if they'd land in his pockets or, up in his head or something, he just crazy. I mean, so I think I start with a certain level and then I either add or take away based on the information that I'm gathering, but I always know that I probably need more. And in biology, the good news is, unless it's a very short sample, like if you're doing data for like a a plot, there are strict rules. It's called experimental design. They've got whole courses. In other words, if I'm sampling in agriculture, if I'm sampling your field, how good is my, fertilizer treatment? You're not going to do one test plot. You're going to do
No.
multiple test plots, probably different areas of your field drain differently. There's the amount of sunlight, the angle of the sun, the slope of the land. And it's like, oh, there you go again. Dr. Bush ruining a simple thing, right? Just use gasoline, set it on fire versus no, you got to be subtle. Do you use pine? Do you use oak? Do you let it season the wood? That's no fun. Does that sound fun? It doesn't sound fun. It sounds, something like, I ain't got time to do that. I just want to set it on fire. And so, Dennis, that I guess the answer is it's baby bear. It's the soup is just right, and you've got to have years of data analysis to know how much data. So it is not something that somebody could flip a coin. Oh, I'll use 3 years of data. That may
Right.
be good enough for certain things, but other things not. So stats and statistical analysis do uh, if you don't have enough data, the stats will say it's non-significant. It doesn't mean it's not a pattern. It's just you got 10 samples, that's not enough. So
No.
it's going to be very conservative. Statistics is conservative. People think it's no, it's like you're only wanting a 5% error. That's right. So 5 times out of 100, so 95 times it's you're saying whatever you're seeing happens. 5% of the time, oh, we messed up. That is very conservative versus 50% of the time. I don't have time for that. Just if it'll hit 1 out of 2, I'll take it. That doesn't work well in gambling. So I use stats in a very conservative way, and you need enough data points. And so I say you start and then you'll find out pretty quick. Statistically, there are methods. How many samples do you need? And if you're a gambler in horse racing, Dennis, sometimes you may need 2 or 3 thousand races
Yes.
before you could probably say, It's time to go to the bank. I need a loan because I got it. And usually by the time you go 1,000 different samples, your pattern broke down and you're losing money. So, that's in it. I wish I could be the bearer of good news and saying, oh, you just flip a coin and you can win. The best thing, red or black, put all your banker on it and walk out the door. That's it. That's the best I can give you for a casino, except for blackjack or poker, right? There's some strategy, horse racing strategy, fantasy football strategy. The house doesn't necessarily win. You have chances to win there, Dennis, but not in roulette, or craps, slot machines. The house wins.
And that's so true. And I actually learned sample sizing
Oh yeah.
from horse race handicapping, because the one summer my first summer when I was handicapping for him, and I was 16 years old. Okay. So I wasn't even legal to place a bet. And I'd come up with a methodology for handicapping that my dad, he tested it at the $2 window, and it made him money. So he believed in it and bragged about me
For sure.
to his buddy, and that's how I got the chance. Well, my very first week handicap at 16 years old, and I had a positive ROI for my top bets, which really didn't surprise anybody because I was taking a lot of long shots, a lot of 7-1 and greater horses were my top picks because my system picked up and coming horses, developing horses. It didn't pick necessarily the horse that was already had hit peak form. It was trying to forecast when a horse would be reaching peak form, and it worked. It worked. But I remember him showing this comparison to me, and my first inkling was, boy, that's based on 60 races.
Well,
You're comparing my 60 races to somebody else's 500 races already at the meet. That's
right.
not that's the wrong comparison. I said, yeah, I could have just been lucky, you know. And he looked at me and he said, you really understand probabilities. And that's the whole key. I mean, if I'm only forecasting 5 days for a particular site, I got a pretty good chance of having a high winning percentage.
Right.
So over the course of a full year, I'm going to have more opportunities for error. And that's what makes it tricky in fantasy football, because we are predicting a moving target. The game is changing, but we're not sure the rate of change of the game. We know what we know from a fact standpoint is last year, using my MVP index, the median over the previous 5 years was 4 guys would hit a 120 or higher while playing 10 or more games. Last year, that number was 0. Scoring was down last year. But can I say with any level of certainty that scoring will be down in 26 based on the fact that it was down in 25 versus the median over the last 5 years? I don't know if I can make that prediction, because over the course of the previous 5 years, the number varied from 2 to 8 quarterbacks in any given year that scored over 120, and it wasn't a straight line in either direction. We went from 8 to 5. This is starting in 2020 to last year. 8 guys over 120, then 5, then 4, then 2, then 4, and then last year's 0. Last year is the outlying year. We won't know until I see 4 more years of data going forward whether what was 2020 just the greatest year we'll ever have in fantasy football. Well, I don't know that until I go back to 2019 and 2018 and 27. So you're in statistical testing of methodologies. I don't know if we have the answer of how many years is the right year to predict 2026 behavior, but it probably, maybe 10 years of data to get an idea of where trends really are, minimum.
Yeah, I start there. It's just, I have five fingers, so yeah, I tell students we have five kingdoms, plants, animals, protista, archaea, and fungi or whatever. And I said, because we got five fingers. And people like, yeah, okay, five. I said, folks, that's just a coincidence. It has nothing to do with how many fingers we have. But students would start writing. Dr. Bush said, realize there are goofy stuff out there. And so, Dennis, I know we got one more, but given what we just said, what are some things that people should be doing now based on what we just kind of talked about? If people are interested in doing research, what might they start doing now? I've got some ideas, but I wanted you, because you're my fellow researcher, what can they start doing now to get ahead of the game? Obviously, listening to us, the two or three that listen to us and pay attention and think about things. And but what if you were just starting? What should they do research wise? I know it's common sense. You know the rules. You follow the ADP. I mean, there's some common sense things, but if you're doing research, uh, how might you start doing? What should somebody do that hasn't done research before?
So if you've been playing fantasy football for several seasons, and I will define several by saying three or more,
Mhm.
by now, if you are a curious person, curious enough to want to do research,
Mhm.
you've already started to see some patterns in your mind. When you're thinking of the last 3 years,
Right.
for instance, I can think of, oh my goodness, here's some things that I saw that either surprised me or were right on the money of what I was thinking. And so you're already in your brain, you've already seen a pattern, but you just haven't put it into numbers yet.
Right.
But you might have a hypothesis on something you think maybe, for instance, you're new to fantasy football and you hadn't been paying attention to some of the things we've already taught people. But you look at it and you say, wow, I notice that guys that have a high percentage of catches versus targets
Mhm.
seem to do pretty well in fantasy football. Maybe that's a key,
Mhm.
is not just looking at number of targets or number of receptions, but maybe it's the percentage
Mhm.
of catches that is something that might be predictive of the future,
Mhm.
more so than maybe touchdowns or yards or whatever. You have a hypothesis. That's where I think every study needs to start. And for
Mhm.
instance,
It's just,
yeah,
yeah.
my MVP concept came about because I saw a pattern. I saw my predictions for week by week projections equated out to a 16 game season at that point. We've gone to 17 now. But this is back of quite a few years that I started this.
Right.
I noticed that even though my predictions were getting better, my ROI was not improving. And that taught me that year end points are probably deceiving more more often than not that just because a guy had the number one number of fantasy points last year doesn't mean he's going to return to that number one spot. It just means that everything played out right for that guy. But if I looked at a 5-year average of fantasy points, that was probably more predictive for year 6 than just looking at any given year by itself. So that's how a hypothesis starts, is from noticing a pattern. If I look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, for instance, and I look at him using my upside consistency metrics, he's been a top 5 guy from year 2 on. That tells me I kind of like his odds of being a top 5 guy going forward. He hasn't reached his peak age yet. He's, hasn't been taking a lot of beating, more than other guys in the league. So he's been as consistent at consistency as possible. I like his chances of repeating that versus a guy who's hit or miss, a guy who's up and down. And even some of the greats have been up and down. And I equate up and down to not quite as consistent. Jamar Chase is the guy that comes to mind for me, because I've seen Jamar Chase have an 88 season in MVP,
Right.
and I've seen him have a 147. And that's the last 3 years. He's gone 88, 147, 119. So last year was even a drop off versus it. He's got 2 140 seasons. I look at that versus an Amon-Ra St. Brown, who his last 3 have been 144, 124, 125. And before that, he was at 120. And before that was his rookie year when he had a 69. Right. So I'm looking at those last 4 years, though, and I'm saying 4 years in a row over 120. Same team, same quarterback, same offense. Coming into the season healthy, hasn't reached the age limit that we know guys start going down. So even if he goes down a little bit, he's pretty solid for a 110 in MVP, which is a solid season. A 110 in MVP, that's 8. That's WR8. That's as low as I can figure Amon-Ra St. Brown should go. And he's probably going lower than that in some best ball drafts right now. So I'm looking at that and going, man, he's solid. He's as solid can be versus Jamar Chase, who is showing seasons of WR18 and WR1 over the last 3 years. So that's kind of how I look at it. But my first step on that process would be to come up with a hypothesis based on something I see in the data that others might not see.
Right.
And it could even be something as simple as a 5-year moving average. What does that tell us for the future? That might be a very simple study to cut your teeth on, because we know in other things that deal with data, the stock market, the grain markets, and even weather forecasting. If I look at the 5-year average for June 1st in weather forecasting, that's going to give me a range. That's going to give me a number. If I look at the high, low, and the 5-year moving average just for June 1st, it's going to give me a reasonably good guess this far out for what June 1st is going to be. And that's how I would attack my first data studies. I would look for a pattern, see something that concerns me. How do rookies do that are drafted in the top 20 picks? Research it. Find out, is that predictive of how well a player is going to do in year 1, or maybe even in year 2, 3, 4, or 5? But that's the first thing I would do, is if you're curious enough to want to do research, your brain has been curious enough already to see some patterns or to see some things that concern you.
When you're approaching a data study, I think some things to consider is prerequisites. I think you need to get and read my article on making a diary and
Yes.
looking at past. I think you need to understand Excel and pivot tables. I think I made a video on how to do a simple pivot table. So, how to cut and paste data that's freely available and start gathering the data. But you need to learn how to manipulate with Excel. And then I would say a beginning statistical uh, textbook. Start just thumbing through some of the concepts. If you're like me, I read a lot on Kindle. There are free books that are available that I bet will give you some basic. Dennis mentioned moving average. What is that? Maybe you've never, don't know what that means. What is average? What is median? What is mode? What is distribution? What's normal distribution? What's a box and whisker? And then you start writing down some of these definitions. You're having, yeah, I know. I'm telling you, get ready to chop the wood. You're not ready to chop the wood yet. I know most people, well, that's too much work. Well, that's fine that you shouldn't do research. You should just pay the best person that your diary says has helped you win money. Well, I don't really care about winning money. Well, you're probably not listening to us because that's what drives us. So I would think about the prerequisites. And yes, if you've never had algebra, whew, you need to go back and take some basic math to understand, division and multiplication. I mean, I just don't know how far back. I'm hoping people have some college background or some advanced high school math skills. But diary, understanding Excel, and understanding some basic stats will be the beginning for that, and building your data sets for you to test. And then if you want to advance, listen to us. But that would be the first three things that I think I would do. Start building your diary, right? Start looking at your previous draft boards. Well, I didn't keep those. Well, then start keeping them. Okay.
Yes.
Remember, if you play one league a year and your natural odds are what, 1 in 12 or 1 in 11 or what, it's going to be a long time for you to figure it out. So I would say find 12, start with 12 teams. You've got to be able, if you're going to make some money, you're going to have to do a lot of leagues and assimilate that. I play about 40 to 50 a year. Dennis is about 30 to 40. And so we're winning every year. Okay. But if we only played one league a year, we could have lots of years, if you understand stats. If you only have one roll of the dice in craps, right? I need that seven. You could wait a long time. Okay, so I'm gonna roll one dice. I'm gonna go away, come back tomorrow. Bet. It may take you a whole month to hit seven. It could be. And so you've got to think about number of replications. So that's part of statistical data sample size and things. But those would be the first three things I would do, and I would do it now. And if you want to reach out, the one or two that listen to us, thank you. Uh, you can ask if you've never done a diary. I've got a video or two out, but we can help. Send us a letter. We can get into more detail about diaries or Dennis's moving average concept. We could let Dennis lecture to you on that, but Uh, you know, that's what we can do, but that's what I would do, Dennis, is start those three things: basic stats, basic Excel, and how to do a diary. I'd start that now. Today's August 12th. I'd start that now. All that. If you start now, by July, you should be at least having some shots at doing some damage this year. In keep listening to us, of course, and you have a shot.
If people have questions about the basics, there's no dumb question to ask of us.
No, no.
We've been there, done that because our research of fantasy football data and getting better at this goes back more than, in my case, almost 30 years.
Mhm.
So it's been a long journey, and you're getting to see the results here on the science of fantasy football. One of the tools that you're using on a regular basis, because you send me such fascinating uh, displays, is from AI.
Yeah,
Because if you ask AI a question, you will get a good consensus answer
right.
that will really let you know what the consensus believes right now in fantasy football. And some of the ones you've shared with me are fascinating,
Yeah,
Professor.
yeah, yeah. Let me do that because I know you and I can talk all damn day here. I know, I know. Let's see. Where did I
And
put it?
here with the math, you talk about the randomness. So if you only win one of 12 leagues, you're going to lose money. You are losing money.
Yeah,
You need to win about 15% of your FPPC leagues, and one of 12 is only 8%. So you need to be twice as good as random chance in order to make money. But
yeah,
that bar is pretty low to make
yeah.
money. But you have to do it smart. If you play one league, that chance of winning money on any given year
Mhm.
is lowered. If you
Yeah,
spread that money out, you have a better chance of winning.
right. So Dennis and I, in our 2 hours up to recording the show, I said, Dennis, you need to put a metric to your uh, index of opportunity index. I said, if we're going to test it over the next few years, we need numbers. We don't, it's hard to test gut feelings. I said, if Dennis had spicy chili for lunch versus ice cream for lunch, he's going to be in a different mood. And there is enough psychological testing, Dennis, that funny things like that, the paint color, there was some guy that wanted to paint all the jail cells pink because that was a softening color so that the inmates wouldn't kill each other. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that people have tried over the years. So if Dennis is eating spicy chili, he may be a little, spicy on his gut feelings. Oh, I'm gonna really reach today for some of my opportunity indexes here. And maybe ice cream, he's feeling satisfied, a little sluggish, a little bit conservative. So you've got to have a methodology. And so I asked Grok the question, adding matrix to gut feelings for better predictions. So that was my prompt, Dennis. And guess what it said? You can read this. Maybe I'll put this up on our site. Turn the gut into number. Number one, Dennis, calibrate. So he calls it the calibration step. Before you look at any state, force yourself to score every player 1 to 10 gut scale. So this is part of your diary. Gut scale 9 to 10, strong conviction. This is my favorite last round steal. 7 to 8, 5 to 6, 3 to 4, 1 to 2. That kind of thing. So right now, Dennis, I see the sure shots versus the avoids. If somebody was doing a test this year, maybe that's the start. Take all your strong convictions and all your avoids. How good are you? At the end of the season, average the number of fantasy points they collected per game or some other metric you're studying there in your sure shots versus your avoids. If your avoids have a higher fantasy points per game
Oh,
than your strong convictions, that tells you got a lot of work to do, Dennis.
oh
And
yeah.
I would put your gut feelings on quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers, because you might be the tight end whisperer, Dennis. You just don't know it. So
Yes.
this might be a test this year. Just how good are you at the extremes? I think the three inner ones are a little bit more for people that have had some time to consider this. But the number one, turn your gut into a number. I'll stop there and let you comment.
Yeah, and I love that. And I'll take it one step further is I had this concept for an opportunity index for several years. And I would look at the low scoring guys at MVP or the holes in a roster, and I would say, gosh, I like this roster spot.
Yeah.
But until you made me think in bets, in betting percentages,
Probability. Yeah.
how much of that dollar would you put on this guy?
Yes.
It really improved my way of looking at it. When you turn a gut feel into a number, you've now made a commitment. And now you can grade how well you have done. And what I found in year one of testing this is that I had a real high hit percentage, like over 90% of the time I spotted the opening. And about 70% of the time I had the right player. So what it told me, and that was not a big shock to me. What it told me is that my philosophy, when there is a hole on a team, at running back, for instance,
Right.
last year, I knew the Dallas Cowboys, that RB1 position with the Cowboys was going to be somebody worth rostering and starting on occasion. Like maybe not, obviously not your number one starter,
Right.
but definitely in that RB2 or flex position, or in our case with FPPC, two flexes. So
Right. Right.
you've got three openings for that player. I was right. And by hedging my bets and taking some Javonte Williams and some Jadon Blue and some Miles Sanders, I ended up with the right guy, who
Right.
was Javonte Williams. He wasn't a guy that we were particularly excited about, but
Nope.
we liked the opening. And that's how we cashed in, is by understanding and taking this gut feeling number system to the next level, which was strategy. And here's where I had two guys that I was in that neutral, I wasn't high on them. I'm 5'6".
And notice you can make this probability too, Dennis.
Yes. Yes. So I'm,
90% to
yeah.
100%.
So I'm on a
One,
50.
10% to 20%.
Correct. So I was on about a 40-40-20 at any given time, between Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Jadon Blue.
Yeah.
Okay. It was like one's 40, one's 40, one's 20. Well, if I'm even wrong at who the 20 is, but I take enough of the guys from all three,
Mm-hmm.
my worst percentage of hitting was 6 and 10.
Yeah.
My best was 8 out of 10. I'm pretty happy with that. If I can
Right.
be 6 out of 10 or 8 out of 10
Mm-hmm.
on a decision late in a draft, I'm jumping at that one. And that's versus if I'm an 8 on a guy, but I got to take him in the late end of the first round or early second. Yes, I'm talking Ashton Giante here.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't worth it, because I had nines and tens ahead of him. that were veterans that I had more confidence on, and ended up being right. So that's where understanding percentages and understanding strategies to go with them can really pay off.
And so this is the calibration step. I would also, if you really want to push this, I would look, say, now versus after the draft. How did
Yes.
that change? Dennis is not
Yes.
saying, but he actually updated it. So I would urge you to take your number, if your gut into a number before the draft. So do it between now and the draft, and then a couple weeks after. Did something change in your opinion? Maybe you're too much. And so now you've got two data points, and maybe you were right early on, and the draft tricked you. Or maybe the draft helped you get better. I don't know, but your diary. And so if you do that under 3 or 4 years, you'll start getting a pattern. I know that means 3 or 4 years of research. Oh, well, document, you just tell me what's on the test, folks. Do you want to win money or do you want to donate to Dennis and I? Because we're not going to tell you who we are. We'll have secret names and you won't know. You'll just know, man, this guy's always, he's beating me everywhere I go. Let's not even talk waiver wire, folks. Dennis and I, we will cut your throat in the waiver wire. You don't even know what happened. You'd be like, where's this player? He's on this guy's team. But anyway, I would say do 2 or 3 calibrations over the season, maybe after the preseason, or maybe
Yes.
during. Start changing. How good are you? Are you overplaying some data and you're listening? Yeah, and record, by the way, how much you spend on X and the Sirius XM. If you're listening 8 to 12 hours with all these different opinions thrown at you, maybe that's too much. Not everybody can hear tons of opinions, right? I'm telling you, as a young man at the track, I'm up here putting a $2 and the guy in front of me is betting $100. That scares me. It's like, well, shit, what does he know? My little $2, I don't know nothing. Maybe I won and he lost, but see, I got scared, Dennis. And, I let things blow out of proportion but this is quantifying it and putting it down as a measuring device, and you can see or you get, have you listened to too much? Are you on X too much listening to this is, it's this season, he's the sleeper, he's the
Yes.
my void, I'll never draft him. I mean, maybe it makes you crazy. So now's the time. Just do you listen to crazy stuff too much or not enough? I don't know. Maybe you don't listen enough. I don't know. But you need to think about how you make decisions and some of that. So that's number one, Dennis. Number two is called the metric layer, the referee. Pick 2 or 3 metrics that historically people have shown have beat the consensus. So they're saying for 2026, Grok is saying projected fantasy points, maybe ESPN or Fantasy Pros or PFF, I don't know, 0 to 10, situational efficiency, opportunity. There's where we're working. Durability, advanced context, something somewhere. Pick 2 or 3 of these to work on and use those as the metric to combine with your gut numbers. So that's called the referee, the metric layer. And then use a weighted average, make the weights of your historical calibration, the final score, gut score times your gut weight, your metric average times 1 minus your gut score. So there's an actual equation, Dennis. I wouldn't do this. I think I'm ahead using advanced stats, but this is a good start. Okay, so they can figure that out and then do a spreadsheet. You can copy and paste, and now you've got a copy of your gut score, your note, your projected point. It's basically saying set up your diary, Dennis, and it's talking about how to use Excel. And then here's a hypothetical example. So this is kind of a player here, hypothetical. It's not real, and it just shows you how you might do this. And you don't kill the gut, but you give it a voice and a check. And this is showing how to do that. And I think it's a method. I'm going to put this up on our site, Dennis, for people, but there's a lot of stuff here. I know I went through this quick, but Dennis and I, we've been talking for about 3 or 4 hours here. We're getting tired and old. But anyway, Dennis, what's your comment about these steps here?
Yeah,
Past number one.
yeah, absolutely love this concept. And what I will tell you is that even if you do number one and just grade
Stop.
yourself,
Yeah.
if that's all you do and you grade yourself and you see that you're hitting at a high level or you see you're hitting at a low level, what
Don't you
that
want to know
does,
though, folks? Dennis,
what
don't you want to
oh
know?
yeah, absolutely, because what that does is it better informs you where you need to look to improve.
Yes.
Again, getting back to my whole thing of I was grading my year-end predictions. I was dividing that number by the total number of, I was equating it out to a full season. So I was dividing that by 16, multiplying it by the number of games the guy actually played, and
Yeah.
comparing it to his total. And when I first started doing that, I was lucky if I was within 30%
Yeah.
on 80, my top 80 guys at running back. By the time I got really good at this, by understanding numbers and understanding how things go, you just get naturally better. I got within like 5 to 10%, which was really good. That should have been a valuable piece of data, but my ROI was going down. My
Yeah.
ROI was just as unpredictable. That taught me that was not important. But if you're following this guide and you're giving this gut feeling on a player a grade, you're noticing your grade is improving and you notice your ROI is also improving, you are on the right track. So even if you just take the first step, which is kind of the lazy step, but you got to start somewhere, you're going to improve your number at the end of the time of doing this over several years.
I agree, Dennis, and I think that this is a step, and at least do number one this year. Okay. I know it, it's like, well, you want the whole, I want to eat the whole buffet now, right? They have these eating content, they give you a 52-ounce steak, and if you eat it in 30 minutes, you get it free or something. That's not, if you're going to be a professional eater of like that, shouldn't you start with a 10-ounce steak and see how fast you can eat it? And okay, I can finish a 10-ounce steak in 20 minutes. So, okay, 52 in an hour. Whoop, I'm not, you're going to have to develop some tricks here, Dennis, to be a hot dog eater, to fight with the nation's hot dog championship every year. You need to start slow, right? Just eat a pack of hot dogs. How long does it take? I couldn't eat a pot of hot dogs without me throwing up, Dennis. Now my dogs can. My dogs can eat
Oh
till
yeah.
they just go over and just flop over. If you feed your dog hot dog, they'll just keep eating. And that's another reason I don't bet on greyhounds. My dad told me years ago they put the old hot dog, they'll feed him, 20 packs of hot dogs for the race. He not gonna run after that rabbit. He's already fed. Versus you starve him. I didn't say this is legitimate, and I know they shouldn't treat these dogs bad. Okay, I'm a biologist, I got that. But I'm just telling you, gambling wise, and of course, I think there's only one state that does greyhound anymore. It's West Virginia, But Dennis, I don't bet that. I mean, you couldn't starve your horses, Dennis. too much without somebody
No,
watching. They're
no.
watching. They got cameras and the vets, and they'll scratch him at the gate if the horse is skin and bones. So, but I'm just saying, I would never bet the dogs or the chihuahuas or the ostriches, whatever you're betting on, Dennis. I've seen all sorts of weird race, the camels. Think about it. If you let your camel drink, 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 or you make him thirsty, they're going to be running different. So just saying, gut into number calibration, start now, and then see if you can work some of these in. I'll post this, folks.
I love
And,
this. Yeah, I
and
love that strategy because here's what I've done with my rookies over the years. Okay, is I put a tier to the rookies before the draft. So, for instance, this year, my top tier quarterback, no surprise, Fernando Mendoza. That doesn't mean that I think he's going to be a success in the National Football League or a great fantasy football stud, but he's the only one in my first two tiers.
right,
I only have three quarterbacks that I've even ranked, and none of them are Ty Simpson right now.
right,
This was my pre-draft. This was done on February 17th of this year. What I know from the past is that guys that I've ranked in the top two tiers have had better success than the guys that I didn't rank in the top two tiers. So I'm
right.
feeling really good about going into this year that I've got three running backs that are in that top tier. And again, this was a February 17th top tier. This will be very different on August 25th when we know, or August 20 or April 27th when we
Right,
know where they drafted, and August 27th.
right,
But right now, I'm feeling really good about either Jeremiah Love, Jonah Coleman, or Emmett Johnson. Those are my top three running backs. That doesn't mean they're the only three that will do great. It's just that I feel that's that when I'm saying I'm trying to predict the top performing player at each position.
right,
I'm not saying that the other guys, I'm not saying that there'll be more than one or less than one that'll be fantasy football viable, but I'm just saying that was where my level of uncertainty is. That's my 9-10s versus fives, and 7-8s versus 5-6s. My top two tiers are my 7 to 10s. And I feel good about that. Those numbers will change though when I see what team they land on. But right now I've got one quarterback, three running backs, and four wide receivers that are in that group, and three tight ends. And I have a tight end that nobody's talking about right now that's in my top three, Max Clare, because I think he's going to get playing time as a rookie because he's more of a typical tight end. And that doesn't mean he's got the chance of being better than the other two guys. He's just going to get on the field first. I don't know if that's going to translate in fantasy football. But this was my February 17th listing. I will not revisit those or change them until I see the draft.
yeah.
Then I'll change them, and then I'll change them closer to the
You're
season.
going to put some information out for the
Oh, I'll
few
put
that listen,
numbers.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll have an article after the draft. Will
yeah.
be my first
Yeah, I'm
opportunity
looking
index.
forward to that
Yep.
because if I do a little best ball in June or
Yes.
July, folks, those are some late round plays. I like to hear what Dennis has to say.
And my goal when I do this is that I want to have my first opportunity index ready by 2 weeks after the draft.
Yeah.
That gives me enough time to look at the players. I've already looked at
And
where the
then you'll
holes are.
update that
Then
later.
it'll be updated as we
Yeah.
get closer to the season.
Preseason and,
Yeah.
injuries and crazy
Yes.
stuff, off
Yes.
field antics. Who
Could be a
knows?
could be a late signing
Yeah, it
for
could be a
free
late
agent.
sign. That's
You
right.
just you just never know what's going to happen. And again, I go into this understanding the range of logical outcomes.
outcomes.
So
Yeah.
when I'm looking at a guy in the
Mhm.
opportunity index, he might be seventh or eighth on the opportunity list. If he made the list and he's going late in drafts, I'm pounding him. Like, I will take the guys that are 8th to 12th on that list,
Right.
and I'll take a chance on them because I'm taking a chance on multiple players
Right.
because I understand that I won't be perfect. I know how outlandish that is to say
Yeah.
when you're advising people on fantasy football, but we're playing the percentages in this game. If I draft a guy as the 50th wide receiver off the board, I don't get excited when he finishes 43rd in points,
No.
folks.
No.
He didn't do a darn thing for your team.
I mean, look at this guy. You think he gets excited over something like that? No.
Now,
Look at him.
if I draft a guy as the 50th wide receiver off
Yeah.
the bunch
Yeah.
and he ends up 25th in total points, you better
Yeah.
believe I'm getting excited. That's
Yeah.
when the eyes bug out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty buggy
But the
now.
key
So,
is the but the key is, folks, understanding that I get to take more than one shot at that receiver guy. I
yeah.
might get to take two at wide receiver. I might take 4 or 5 at running back.
Yeah.
I'll never take one at quarterback, and I might take one at tight end.
Right.
But the key is understanding the strategy and the uncertainty at the positions. I
Right.
feel much better that I could tell you who are the top 12 quarterbacks
Right.
than I can tell you who's going to be 25th to 36th at wide receiver or running back on any given year. I understand who are the contenders for those spots, but I have a better feel for who the top quarterbacks are going to be. And when I can get those guys at a value, and I'm taking two anyway.
Yeah.
So even if I'm wrong on a particular player get hurt, I'm going to have a quarterback that is going to fit my starting lineup each and every week and do a pretty good job. That's the difference between understanding predictions versus a strategy that tries to pay off even when you might be wrong about any one particular player. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out all of our articles and videos from the professor talking about strategy, talking about different ways that we look at the data. My MVP articles, if you hear the term MVP, it's just an upside consistency metric. You hear us talk about Bush LR or COM data. That is the professor's upside consistency data. Some are better at some positions than others. Some are better at different points in a player's career than others. But we combine them to get the best of all worlds. So check all of that out on scienceoffantasyfootball.com and come on back here next week for another edition of The Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Start researching.
That Grok article was fabulous.
Wasn't that
I
good?
like that.
You
I
know,
like
I
that.
need to, this is after the show recording here, since I know it's going to take a while to us to get. I'm thinking the next question is maybe range of outcomes. Is range of outcomes
Yes,
important in fantasy football versus
that's
gambling? Or I don't know,
ooh.
something that'll be a prompt. I bet Grok will give us something to flap about. I'm thinking I need to put the title Dr. Grok versus the professor or something like that, or the versus the science of fantasy football guys. I don't know, something like that. Dr. Grok or Grok versus the researchers or something. But start putting, because I've got a lot more of those, as you know, I'll send them
Oh
to you.
yeah.
Think
Yeah, and
I
I
think.
love those discussions because we'll have very interesting back and forths.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is we never have once looked at something that Grok produced and said, this is the holy tablet
No,
of this
no.
answer. What we're looking at is
Kind of what's out there.
it's a consensus of what's out there.
Yeah. And some of it is not,
And
we found our
most often,
consistency is
folks,
missing.
the result is a new.
Uh-oh, Dennis is peeking in and out. But anyway, we notice consistency is not spoken of. So let me stop recording here because I think Dennis, the cat, has got his tongue. So come back. Woo woo.